Hey, this is Lindsay, and today we're talking about the 2020 Honda CRF250R. We're going to go over the updates to this bike. This is year 3 for this generation of bike from Honda. So typically the way Honda works, they'll do a 4-year run for the motocross bikes in a generation. So year 1, the bike gets introduced, it's all new. Year 2, some minor tweaks. Going into year 3, we see a mid-generation change, usually something chassis related, some decent size engine upgrades. Going into year 4, which can be some minor updates or maybe even kind of B&G as it leads out of that generation. Not saying for sure this is going to be a 4-year run, but based off Honda's past record, I would expect this bike to be a 4-year run. So we're on year 3. And we've got a decent list of changes. We've got some engine updates, some well-needed ones, just kind of actually a host of multiple ones we'll go over, trying to affect power in different areas of the power band. I say power band, 2-stroke guys are going to laugh at me saying power band about a 4-stroke, but the overall power range. Then there's actually a chassis update similar to what the 450 got last year. But starting with the engine, new cam profile. They're basically delaying the opening of the exhaust valves and reducing the valve overlap. So they're opening the valves later, and they're trying to decrease them overlapping on their positions. This improves, by their claim, torque and power in the 6,000 to 10,000 RPM ranges. It's good to see them going back a little bit more towards top-end power because last year they made some tweaks to mapping, to head pipe, throttle body size to try to improve the mid-range. And while they did make it a little more responsive in the mid-range last year, they almost, in my opinion, started to get away from the top-end power the year before. They didn't really make an overall improvement last year. I felt like they just kind of moved the power around a little bit and made it feel a little more responsive. But in this case, they've got a few changes in here where they're definitely trying to increase the actual output. The cam profile from 6,000 to 10,000 RPMs, first one. They've optimized the combustion chamber shape, so they're actually tweaking on the head design a little bit there. Ignition timing is optimized at 8,000 RPM for improved torque and power. Overall, they're actually changing the ignition mapping a lot because it gains the gear position sensor that the 450 got last year. So now it has dedicated ignition maps for all 5 gears, one for each position. Fuel mapping's the same, but ignition changes per gear. Interesting one on the head pipe is they have removed the resonance chamber we had on the right side for the first 2 year. They claim this improves the power characteristic, especially when shifting from second to third. So there's something they found there to eliminate it. If you look, a lot of aftermarket pipe systems are not running resonance. Even companies that typically would run a resonance style chamber, FMF goes down from their usual mega bomb to a much smaller power bomb. I believe the PC goes away from one completely. Yosh doesn't usually sell pipes with resonance chamber, but they do race team systems with it, and they have not done it for the Geico team. They've really worked on making, really working on the profile of these head pipes to try to increase the airflow at low RPMs or low air speeds. So it looks like Honda has kind of watched everybody else do that and has decided to make a similar change overall. The muffler is also revised for improved low to mid-range torque, so they've probably changed the baffle size or the core or something internally in the mufflers to change the back pressure. The new air filter element is 10% larger for increased airflow, so it just has more overall volume to pull from. The left side radiator has been enlarged, so they've probably done something there to help the shape of the radiator to try to drop it down, get as close to... It's been tough since they've added the left side head pipe. They basically had a radiator that returned to the size that's on the right side. And since then, the Honda 250s had a bit of cooling problems. I remember the first year, the intro we went to, they just kind of would puke coolant a little bit constantly. I know the race teams have struggled with that a little bit, keeping the bikes cool in like outdoor nationals. So they've made some changes there to increase the overall size of that left side radiator. It'll be interesting to kind of see the bike up close to see how they did that with the head pipe design. They've also changed second gear ratio, which I am really stoked on because the factory connection race bikes actually have this. Basically, a lot of us were initially the first 2 years, one of the bigger complaints the intro has been trying to get from second to third felt like a huge gap. Like you had to rev second to the absolute top of the range to get into a premium point of third. You really could never shift second early and hit a prime point of power. So the HRC guys, of course, have made this style of transmission for the Geico team specifically for Supercross reasons. They had a taller second gear, which closed that gap to third, and that's what they've gone ahead and done for production. So I'm pretty stoked to see that. We're going to have a little bit easier movement from second to third gear now. The clutch capacity has been increased by 18%, and clutch spring has a higher rate. So it doesn't list why on the capacity. I'm guessing that just means overall thicker plates. Each plate number is probably a little bit thicker, which increases to overall of 18% thickness of clutch pack would be my guess is what they're saying there. It doesn't say anything about a diameter change. Also, the clutch springs have a higher rate, so they've got a stiffer clutch spring set up in the bike. Then the big one for the chassis, new lighter aluminum perimeter frame and aluminum swing arm are designed to achieve increased yaw angle stiffness while retaining lateral and torsional stiffness, resulting in improved stability. Now, I'm kind of curious, as that sounds like a little bit different lingo than they used on the 450 frame update last year. So while the 250 and 450 have basically been sharing the same frame other than the bottom cradle to put in the 250 engine, I'll be curious to see if this 250 frame is unique to this bike, because the wording they use there for what stiffness was affected is a little bit different than the 450 PR from last year. So it may have its own unique frame now. We'll have to learn more when we actually get to the intro and get to talk to the engineers about exactly what areas they changed, because for the 450, they basically changed the back half of the frame. The weld you see on the center of the spar going down the side spars, from that point down to the foot peg area where it meets with the cradle, swing arm, shock tower, that whole area is what changed on the 450 frame dramatically. 250 though, it's claiming new frame, may just be that update area, but it doesn't specify an area, so it might be its own frame in the end. Newly shaped foot pegs are 20% lighter. They shed mud more easily. That's kind of a little bit something everybody's always messing with, is foot pegs that can eliminate or either not pack in with dirt or eliminate it easier. They actually go through a little bit what the suspension setting changes are going to be to this model. The fork has increased in low-speed damping, and the shock has increased low-speed compression and reduced high-speed compression. So they're saying this is overall improve the handling characteristics, stability, tracking, turning, and traction. So basically, at that point, it seems like the bike's going to be a little bit more settled in the rear, possibly. High-speed compression seems to affect how the bike squat typically. Low speed might affect how it hits acceleration bumps. And then if the fork has increased low-speed damping, it might hold up a little more. So the bike just probably is going to feel a little more balanced while tracking in and out of corners. So that'll be a nice little improvement, albeit the 250 has already been really, really good on the chassis and suspension side. There's really not much to complain about there with that bike, even in its current trim. Like the 450s, the battery has been repositioned 28 millimeter lower to drop the center of gravity. They basically redesigned the battery tray and lowered it into the airbox to move the battery and the weight associated with that farther down into the bike. The rear brake has a shorter hose and longer, lighter pedal, as long as new pad material for improved power and better durability in muddy conditions. They've also eliminated the lower rear brake guard like they did on the 450, which reduces weight and improved cooling. New graphics, it's red. It has just a little bit more of a, traditional Honda look to it. So that's basically our list of updates. It does not gain a torque control system like the 450 did. It did not gain that. It still has 3 maps and a HRC launch control. So it has its one mapping switch on the left. That's the kill switch plus the little blue buttons that run the maps. And you can also activate the launch control system from that same one. And it also retains the 44 millimeter throttle body, which was added last year. So it's still on the downsized throttle body overall. Lastly, it's going to come with the Dunlop MX3S tires. They are not going for 33s. Exclusively available through Honda is how they list it. So if you're into those tires, it sounds like you will be able to get them through a Honda dealership exclusively, as Dunlop moves into the MX33 product for its public sale pretty much across the board. So definitely a decent amount of changes, especially engine-wise, which, like I said, the Honda just kind of overall needs. Not that it's been interesting testing this bike in shoot-on-earth situations. Lap time-wise, it's always been super competitive. Pretty much, not regardless of the rider you put on it. Lazier ones definitely suffer from the down-low torque, but anybody that kind of can hold the power in the right area can turn great lap times on, mostly because the chassis and suspension is so good. But where the bike has suffered a bit has always been just with consistency lap to lap, because it doesn't have a lot of down low power and it doesn't have a lot of response or pickup or recovery per se. If you make mistakes, it's harder to come back from them on this bike, it seems like. So guys would struggle a little more. So if they can definitely increase power, it's already got a great chassis, it's already got a great suspension. If they're able to improve on that, even good for them. But overall, if you've been wanting a Honda 250 and you've been kind of waiting it out without riding the bike, can't say for sure, but just seeing the list of improvements, I'm stoked compared to last year's bike because, like I said, for me, the 18 to the 19 wasn't, even though they made a decent amount of changes, it just kind of moved the situation of the power. It didn't really make an overall increase for me. But for the 20, what they're talking about with improvements to the engine seems good. Really stoked on the gear ratio change. And then, like I said, if they can improve the chassis and suspension beyond what it already is, then good for them, because that's already pretty much the best aspect of their bike right now. If you want to check out the spec sheet, I've just uploaded it here at the end of the video so you can see weight, price, etc. The bike's listed to be available in August. That's likely when we'll get out to test it. That's Honda typically has their bike intros for us within a week of them hitting the dealership, so the info is pretty fresh in mind when it gets released to the public. So stay tuned for the bike test on that. Stay tuned for more just first looks like this, just going over the tech info. Make sure you hit subscribe, and thanks for watching.